we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
As you know it's discussion and debate on big topics. We are going to be covering a lot today. We are, of course, your daily dose of non-woke, straight-talking, old-school girl power, where we seek to purge the country of toxic liberal waste. Keeping me company in the ladies' locker room today is Samantha Smith, and here's what's coming up on the show. Sir Keir Starmer sets out his vision for a future Labour government, but what does his party offer women? Does he even know what a woman is? As the world is gripped by the Ghislaine Maxwell grooming case, our guest asks, why do we find it so uncomfortable to talk about problems closer to home? That's what we need to talk about for the next hour. What do you want to say? You can always email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. But first, it's time for the news headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at just gone 2 o'clock. Boris Johnson is due to address the nation this afternoon alongside his top scientific advisers. Chief Medical Officer Sir Chris Whitty and Chief Scientific Officer Sir Patrick Vallance will join Boris Johnson at 5 p.m. Of course, we'll bring that to you here live on GB News when it happens. Well, it follows at least 6 hospital trusts declaring critical incidents as Omicron cases threaten to staff shortages there. The Prime Minister says it's essential to look after the NHS, as some health leaders warn they're in a state of crisis. Well, one of those is United Lincolnshire Hospitals NHS Trust, who say extreme and unprecedented staff shortages were expected to result in compromised care. Now, meanwhile, as some schools have started the new term today, classes could merge into large groups if teaching staff levels dip too low. Children across England are required to wear face masks and take a lateral flow test before they return to the classroom. The government says its priority is to keep schools open, but Labour's Shadow Education Minister Bridget Phillipson told GB News the government hasn't done enough to prepare for a surge in Omicron cases.
Before Christmas, we were saying that the government should use that break to roll out the vaccine to all eligible children. It's been a huge missed opportunity to do that. We also need to see proper ventilation in our schools. Head teachers are being told just to open the windows and put children in coats. I don't think that's good enough. And on testing, we know that many parents have experienced difficulties getting their hands on testing kits, and it's vital that we all test our children to make sure that we're kind of keeping control of the virus.
35 migrants attempting to cross the Channel to the UK have been taken to Dover by the local lifeboats this morning. More illegal vessels are also being intercepted by UK Border Force. It follows new figures that show the number of people making the dangerous journey trebled last year. There were more than 28,000 illegal crossings in 2021. Our Home and Security Editor Mark White is in Dover. He says the government efforts to tackle the problem have so far been ineffective.
The Home Secretary has vowed to tackle the Channel migrant crisis in 2022 by going after the people smugglers. But just 4 days into the new year, those organised criminal gangs don't appear to be getting Priti Patel's message, as the first migrants were taken here to Dover Harbour. 35 landed here by the Dover lifeboat just after 10:30 this morning. Border Force vessels are also involved in intercepting a number of other small boats.
Sir Keir Starmer has insisted Labour is a patriotic party, and he said if voted into government, he'd write a new chapter of its history. Speaking to local politicians in Birmingham, the Labour leader said he offered a new contract with the British people based on the principles he named of security, prosperity and respect. He also said his party would create 100,000 new start-up businesses and hubs of excellence. The Home Secretary says all historical convictions for consenting gay sex will be pardoned. Priti Patel said more people would have convictions for same-sex sexual activity cleared as she expands the list of former offences in the pardoning scheme. It now includes any former crime involving consenting same-sex adults. Priti Patel says the government is aiming to right the wrongs of the past. Now, a US judge is going to rule on whether a civil sex lawsuit can be brought against the Duke of York. Virginia Giuffre is suing Prince Andrew for alleged sexual assault when she was a teenager, but the Duke's legal team denied the allegations and will attempt to dismiss the case at a hearing today. Yesterday, a document was made public revealing the terms of a $500,000 payout from convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein to Miss Giuffre, which prevented her from speaking publicly. Former royal correspondent for The Sun, Charles Ray, says the legal argument does not exonerate Prince Andrew.
Does Andrew need this agreement if, as he says, he is innocent of all these charges? Now, it's not a good look using a 12-year-old agreement drawn up by a convicted sex offender, to try and get out of, answering the questions.
The founder of an American blood testing business has been convicted of fraud. The company, Theranos, had been valued at $9 billion after claiming it had revolutionary finger prick blood testing technology that could identify diseases, but it never worked. Billionaire Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty on 2 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud. She could face 20 years in jail. And David Bowie's estate has sold his publishing rights in a multi-million-dollar deal. Warner Chappell Music has acquired access to 26 studio albums. The agreement covers hit songs like Let's Dance and Heroes, released during the British artist's 6-decade career. You are up to date. Now back to the afternoon agenda and Alex.
Now, do you remember when Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer gawped impotently when his MP Rosie Duffield got set upon by party zealots for saying only biological women should be allowed into women's refuges, prisons, changing rooms and loos? When asked whether only women have cervixes, he momentarily squirmed before sanctimoniously stating that it was something that shouldn't be said. Having dined out for decades on being a safe space for women, Labour threw our safe spaces under the bus. Well, today, Starmer has taken to his soapbox to capitalise on the emergent exodus of red wall Tories, but there were slim pickings for women who feel politically homeless because of the party's view on biological sex. So can women really vote for a party that would eliminate their rights? Well, it's hardly as if the Tories have been defenders of small c conservative values that traditionally protected women. We live in a society where porn is available to all at the touch of a phone. Broad daylight attacks on women have shot up. Rape culture in schools is spiralling out of control. And it's more difficult to have a child and hold down a job than ever before. So why is there such a deathly silence from the Green benches? While Starmer pays lip service to the cause, saying Labour would introduce legislation to end the national epidemic of violence against women, his pitch today was barren on services to cervixes. So where can we cast our votes? Can Labour plug the gaping holes in Tory social policy? Or is Sir Keir spineless against the radical left? Today, we really need to talk about whether ladies can lean on Labour. Well, my next guest was a lifelong Labour voter until the issue of gender ideology took hold. Academic and author Heather Brunskell-Evans joins me now. Heather, fantastic to have you on board. Welcome. So you were sacked as a spokeswoman for the Women's Equality Party because of your views on the importance of biological sex. Do you find yourself now politically homeless?
Completely politically homeless. I was a lifelong Labour voter before I joined the Women's Equality Party. And I have to say, I would find it very difficult to vote Labour now. and to vote for the Women's Equality Party, which is equally spineless and useless with regard to biological women.
What was it that made you leave the Labour Party in the first place? Was it simply this particular question, or did you find that they were just not standing up for women in any way at all?
Can I just make clear that I wasn't a member of the Labour Party? I was a voter, or a lifelong voter. I moved to the Women's Equality Party because I thought there was more focus on women's issues at that time, completely unaware of the development of gender identity politics that were taking place both in the Women's Equality Party and in the Labour Party. Because, of course, this issue has taken us, probably most of us, by surprise. It's grown in the past 3 to 4 years with such intensity. It's now no longer possible to say that a woman is an adult human being or that a woman has a cervix. Such language is outlawed now by the Labour Party and the Women's Equality Party. So it's an astonishing rise of a particular ideology, which renders me unable to vote for Labour ever again. And I do know a lot of other women who feel exactly the same. Of course, we're always targeted when we want to claim that there is no such thing as a woman in a man's body as being conservative. And this isn't true at all. Labour women feel really disenfranchised at the moment. And interestingly, it's Labour politicians who are even more strong in affirming this ideology or signing up to it than Keir Starmer himself, who seems to be bumbling around, unsure of what he thinks, but complying with a set of ideas which I'm not sure that he even comprehends.
It's an interesting point you make, though, about whether, there are men out there, do they comprehend it? And a lot of people say, well, what's the problem with a trans person saying, I am a woman, or a man self-identifying as a woman, and then having access to women's services? So in your own words, what do you think is the big problem with that?
I don't find any problem with a man identifying as a woman or anybody identifying with whomsoever they please. This isn't about being the sort of gender police. It's about a very serious issue which the general public really need to know about. There's a difference between identifying as you please, wearing what you want. I mean, who cares, quite frankly? It's about saying that you actually are a woman, not that you're identifying as one, because that makes you feel more comfortable. Once you say you are a woman, you then have access to all women's spaces. So if we take prisons as an example, and Lisa Nandy at a particular hustings when there was a leadership election was infamously recorded as saying that men who now identify as women, who have even who are in prison because they've committed sexual crimes against women, should be placed in women's prisons. Well, I mean, the reality of that is that women in women's prisons will be faced with a sexual offender in their personal spaces, and that they have no power to object or to resist. And in fact, what is actually happening, if I could just finish this point of the limited resources that prisons have, some of them are being used to protect women, to safeguard the women in prisons for the men who have committed sexual offences, who are in their midst simply because they identify as women. So this has got completely out of hand, completely and absolutely out of hand. And it's, of course, trans people have human rights. We all have human rights, but women's rights are being eroded as we speak. It's a very serious issue.
Is there anything that the Labour Party could do to attract your vote back?
Well, very little. They could alert my interest again if they would actually have a proper discussion about this. But what is outlawed, as it were, is even discussing it. So I don't know whether you're aware of it or whether the general public is aware of it, but there was a trans rights manifesto which was signed by various female politicians, including Lisa Nandy and Angela Rayner, I think, Rebecca Long Bailey too, wasn't signed by Keir Starmer, in fact, which said that anyone who had any gender critical views, such as myself, i.e. by gender critical, all that means is I don't believe that it's possible for a man to be a woman or for a woman to actually be a man, should be expelled from the Labour Party. So the Labour Party is demonstrating itself as being really authoritarian. I mean, outside of this issue even, you can see that it is becoming so authoritarian, and that's something, this is bleeding into a much bigger problem, actually, which is about correct think, expulsion if you don't have correct think, lack of discussion, lack of transparency about how decisions are made. So, in truth, although it to actually put my cross against a Conservative member of Parliament in the ballot box will sicken me. I'll find it very difficult to do it. I cannot put my cross for the Labour Party.
Heather Brunskell-Evans, thank you ever so much for joining me in debating this deeply sensitive issue. That's Heather, of course, who's an author and academic and increasingly a friend of this show. Well, let's go back to my studio guest, Samantha Smith. As a young woman in your 20s, do these issues worry you?
Well, I think, first off, Alex, it's very important that we state this is not all trans women and not all trans men that we're speaking about. I have had experiences myself. I had a friend who was at my school. I went to an all-girls grammar school in Shropshire that was there from year 7, began their transition in year 11, and under no terms, under no circumstances were there any questions about whether they should be allowed to remain at the school, because they were in an environment, in a place where they were safe, supported and surrounded by friends. But there is a very vocal minority and a dangerous minority that are making these safe spaces, these supportive environments for young women and young trans men, young trans women, etc., unsafe and dangerous to be in. As a survivor of sexual abuse myself, I know that as soon as we throw open the doors of those changing rooms and women's bathrooms for any man who decides that they identify as a woman without any sort of transition, any surgery, any paperwork to show a real commitment to their transition or their supposed transition, it allows any man who so wishes to enter those same environments.
Yeah, I mean, I often use the analogy, it's a bit like leaving your front door open. Not everybody's a burglar, but a burglar is going to be the opportunist who walks through it. Now, I don't know if you caught what Keir Starmer was saying today, but do you think the Labour Party have any hope, and we putting the trans issue aside, of getting girls like you on board to vote for them?
I think more and more the Labour Party is becoming an outside pressure group, almost a cacophony of university politics, but put onto the green benches. Politicians have no right to dictate what goes on in an individual's private life, just like we have no reason and no right to dictate whether people should be able to transition. We also have no right to police people's thoughts, and whether, for example, the guest that you just had on, she is perfectly entitled to feel the way that she feels about trans men accessing women's spaces, trans women accessing women's spaces, and she should not be persecuted or thrown out of a party that she has put so much time and dedication and effort into for simply going against the status quo. If I were thrown out of the Conservative Party for believing that trans women are women, I would be outraged.
But I mean, look, the Labour Party actually doing pretty well in the polls right now, and Boris Johnson doesn't exactly have a great record on this either, does he? He equally couldn't seem to say that only women have a cervix. And from my perspective, I can't think of a single thing that the Conservative Party have announced in the past decade that I think that's a great policy for women. What's your view on the Conservatives in this arena?
So I'm a Conservative Party member. I've been a member since I was 15 years old, but I think you're absolutely right that all of the major political parties at the moment seem to be silenced on this issue. They are almost cowed in fear at upsetting the vocal minority, the very aggressive, very confrontational, very reactionary side of the trans activism scene. And there's a fear of being labelled a transphobe or, anti-LGBTQ+. It does not make you homophobic, it does not make you transphobic to want to protect women's spaces. We've seen this with J.K. Rowling. She was accused of so many different egregious behaviours and crimes that she did not commit. She simply was looking to protect women and protect those who are vulnerable, including trans men, including trans women, from potentially being exploited or abused by that very dangerous minority.
Samantha, thanks so much. We're coming back to you in a bit now. What do you think on this subject? Are you a homeless female voter wondering whether you can actually vote for any of the major parties or even the minor ones? What sort of issues do you want political parties to be covering? And do the Labour Party still have it in them to potentially be some of the most female and mother-friendly party? It's a big question. I know men too. I'd like you to get in touch. Do you think that the politics today is standing up for women enough? We are, of course, going to continue this conversation throughout the show, and I do love to hear your thoughts. Is that something that bothers you? Can you see why some women are upset? Email me, gbnews@gbnews.uk, and tell me what you think. And also, of course, there is going to be lots of interaction on Twitter over this at GB News. Now, GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White joins us now live from Dover. We understand there has been quite a significant amount of activity. We're going to be getting the latest from him on the ground. It's time for a short break first and a check on the weather forecast.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. If you've been out today, you'll know it's turned colder. Certainly feeling cold out there this evening, exacerbated by a brisk and pretty bitter wind across the northeast. And there's some wintry showers around as well. Could turn things pretty icy through the night and first thing in the morning, particularly across northern Scotland, close to this area of low pressure. Look at those isobars really squeezing together. It's been very, very windy across the northeast with snow showers here, blizzards in places. Now, those winds slowly easing overnight. We do have a yellow warning in place for both the winds and the snow showers coming in, potentially turning things icy across northeast Scotland. Also, the risk of some icy conditions for Wales and Northern Ireland as the showers keep going here through the night. Elsewhere, largely clear. Temperatures getting close to freezing in towns and cities, a little below in rural areas. A chilly start then to Wednesday for sure, but generally a fine sunny day. Still some showers for Wales and Northern Ireland. They should fizzle out here, and wintry showers will keep going all day across the far northeast, where the winds will continue to ease down. In fact, for all of us, the winds will be lighter tomorrow and with more sunshine. Actually, although temperatures are below average for the time of year, it shouldn't feel too bad out there. A pleasant, bright winter's day. Quite quickly, though, through tomorrow evening, we are going to see a frost forming fairly sharply. As the winds ease down, temperatures are going to tumble quickly. There'll still be some wintry showers in the far northeast, but for most it's going to be dry and clear, and the temperatures will drop, even in urban areas, below freezing, -1, -2 in the countryside, -5, -6, maybe -10, where there's snow lying across Scotland. And then we see a band of wet weather coming in during Thursday, so that'll pick the temperatures up, but also it will bring some hill snow to Northern Ireland, but perhaps more widely over the hills and mountains of North Wales, Northern England and Scotland, some snow for a time on the hills before it turns back to rain, and eventually things turn a little milder once more from the southwest.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. We have some breaking news right now. The first migrant crossings in the Channel have been taking place. We've got live footage of that. GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White joins us now from Dover. Mark, just 4 days into the new year, and here we are again, seemingly.
Yes, indeed. This is just 4 days, as you say, into the new year, and already the migrants are coming, and they are coming more than 100, it looks like, today so far. For our viewers who are obviously watching this, you can see the migrants coming off the Border Force vessel Hurricane. For those on radio who don't have the benefit of being able to see it, I'll describe it for you. The Hurricane is a catamaran, one of Border Force's larger vessels, and it was, by the looks of it, pretty packed out when it came in there. The migrants are coming off now this catamaran in groups of about 5 from what I can count. Just a very quick rough count of the Border Force personnel who are taking them up in small groups, 5 at a time. And they come up a gangway here in Dover Harbour, up to the top of the gangway and then to a makeshift reception centre, which is effectively just some marquees that they've been operating from for more than a year now. As they have dealt with bigger and bigger numbers, they've had to increase the size of these marquees, and actually they built a multi-million pounds prefabricated building, but it still cost a fair bit, a larger building to deal with the significant numbers of migrants that they have been getting. Last year, of course, that figure, 28,000, more than 28,300 in fact, which is treble the total that came across for the previous year. And seeing what we are seeing now, which is migrants continuing to come up this gangway from this Border Force vessel, we understand that up to 5 small boats have been intercepted in the English Channel today, and conditions are pretty horrendous out there. There was a brief window where clearly the people smugglers, the criminal gangs, felt that they could manage to get a few boats off the beaches of northwestern France. They took advantage of that, and they will take these risks and put people into, you know, fairly horrific and unsafe conditions if they can get the boats off the beach in the first place. And that is what they did overnight and into this morning. Those people, as I say, you're seeing arriving there, and an indication, I think, of what we are going to see now in the weeks and months ahead, that anytime there's a break in the weather, we will get more scenes like this, with migrants arriving, taking that very hazardous journey across the Channel. We saw, of course, 27 people who lost their lives in November of last year, and there's a very real concern that the authorities have that if the criminal gangs continue to push these flimsy vessels out into the water in these kind of conditions, that we may see more in the way of tragedies in the English Channel.
Thank you, Mark. Well done for getting that live footage for us there. Pictures we're all getting rather used to. Lots and lots of what appear to be many young men entering the country via boats across the English Channel. Well, now it's time for a new section of the show, where we doff our fascinators to the imagined matriarchy as we go about building our very own manifesto. All my guests get to nominate 3 policies they think would make the world a better place. And, of course, as High Empress of the show, I decide if they make the cut. So, Samantha, you're in charge of the world today. What's your first policy?
My first policy would be doing away with victim blame culture, especially around online grooming and harassment for young women. When I was in school, which is not too many years ago, I suppose, we had an annual assembly with the local police force where we were told that it is as much of a crime to send nudes underage as it is to receive them, and that both parties can get prosecuted and potentially face prison or whatever other sentences our 14-year-old brains could imagine. So it created a sense of victim blaming and a culture of fear that meant that young girls like myself felt unable to come forward if they became a victim of online grooming. It's been reported that 92% of girls have experienced sexist name-calling frequently or sometimes. It's also been reported that nearly 90% of girls and nearly 50% of young boys have received unwanted nude photos or felt pressured to send them frequently or often. This sort of culture is not only toxic, but suggests that women and young girls are the makers of their own destiny and that they are somehow at fault if they feel pressured into sending or exposing themselves to potentially grown men, predators on the internet, who have no regard for their well-being or their safety.
Do you know, I'm so glad I grew up at school before mobile phones with cameras and stuff was invented. I never had to go through this. Check, we love it. That's definitely in there. Number 2?
On this same thread, I'd like harsher prosecution for crimes of harassment, especially in the wake of the Sabine Nessa case, the Sarah Everard case. We're still seeing women feeling unsafe and harassed on the streets, on the internet, online, in everyday life. Too many women have come to accept harassment as a byproduct of normal life. 65% of women, according to a report published in 2021, have experienced harassment of some form in the past 12 months. It's frankly outrageous that women are still expected to take it as a compliment or just move on with their lives. I get freaky messages. I've had people send letters to my home address, which isn't published anywhere online, and this is just seen as, you know, a byproduct of being a woman. You put yourself out there, and so you should expect to be harassed to some certain extent. It's not appropriate, it's not legal, and it's not right for women to have to expect to face this sort of abuse on a daily basis.
Do you think there's something in particular going on societally that's behind this? Because, I mean, look, I'm a female TV presenter now. I know where you're coming from. I get a lot of unsolicited messages and comments of extremely sexual nature, aggressive nature, threats. I mean, I've got a thick skin. I just think, what a bozo. But do you think that there's something else going on that has made men act with impunity like this?
I think a lot of it comes from the rise of pornographic imagery and pornographic material available online, the pornification of modern society. We're seeing men and young boys raised with pornographic material as their ideal and their normal of what sex and normal healthy relationships should be like. 16% of girls believe that sexting is a normal part of a healthy relationship. It isn't. You should never feel pressured to expose yourself and to become vulnerable to your partner or to a stranger just because you think that that is normal. It absolutely isn't. Young women should not have to feel as though they need to satisfy their partner's sexual needs in order to keep them around.
Got a wise head on young shoulders. Agree with you totally, Samantha, 100%. OK, your third policy for the manifesto?
I'd really like to see us promote positive and inspiring role models to young women. We've had enough of Instagram influencers and Love Islanders. I want people like Emma Raducanu, the Duchess of Cambridge, Tsai Ing-wen, the first female Prime Minister of Taiwan. I want Kate Bingham, a fantastic scientist, absolutely led the way in the UK's vaccine rollout. We need young women to be able to look up to older women in society and think, yes, I can achieve more than becoming famous off of my looks. I don't need a man, I don't need society's approval, I don't need to be a size 6 and have beautiful blonde hair and a beautiful body in order to be successful.
Samantha, you are already a great role model for young women, so give yourself a pat on the back for that. I agree entirely. I always call it culture with a K, the Kardashian culture, where women are encouraged to actually undergo intrusive, invasive surgery to please the male gaze. I mean, what on earth are we doing in the 21st century? Well, a lot to take in, wasn't it? But have this little short break. But first of all, it's time for the news headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. Boris Johnson is due to give a press conference with his top scientific advisers this afternoon. Chief Medical Officer Sir Chris Whitty and Chief Scientific Officer Sir Patrick Vallance will join the Prime Minister at 5 p.m. in a statement to the nation. It follows at least 6 hospital trusts declaring critical incidents as Omicron cases threaten staff shortages. The Prime Minister says it's essential to look after the NHS, and some health leaders warn they're in a state of crisis. A US judge is going to rule on whether a civil sex lawsuit can be brought against the Duke of York. Virginia Giuffre is suing Prince Andrew for alleged sexual assault when she was a teenager. The Duke's legal team deny the allegations, and they'll attempt later today to dismiss the case at a hearing. Yesterday, a significant development. A document was made public revealing the terms of a $500,000 payout from the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein to Miss Giuffre, which prevented her from speaking publicly. 35 migrants attempting to cross the Channel to the UK have been taken to Dover by the local lifeboat forces. More illegal vessels are also being intercepted by UK Border Force. It follows new figures that show the number of people making the dangerous journey trebled last year. There were more than 28,000 illegal crossings in 2021. Sir Keir Starmer has defended Labour as a patriotic party and said if voted into government, he'd write a new chapter of its history. Speaking to local politicians in Birmingham, the Labour leader says he wants to start the new year by making a pledge of straight leadership. He also said his party would create 100,000 new start-up businesses and hubs of excellence. That would build on existing regional strengths, such as the video gaming in Dundee and the pharmaceutical industry in Cambridge. You're up to date. I'll be back with more for you at 3 o'clock.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, lawyers for Prince Andrew will attempt to persuade a judge in America today to dismiss the civil case made against him by Virginia Giuffre, who claims that she was trafficked by deceased sex offender Jeffrey Epstein when she was 17, below the age of majority in America, and named the prince as one of her alleged offenders. The prince will use video link to watch proceedings today at 3 p.m. after the 12-page document revealing terms of a secret payout from the billionaire financier Epstein to Ms. Giuffre was published. Well, let's cross to Windsor and our GB News reporter Ellie Costello. Ellie, explain more about what's actually taking place today.
Hi Alex, so yes, Tuesday the 4th of January 2022 could be a big day for Prince Andrew and his legal team. Very shortly he will be meeting virtually Virginia Giuffre's legal team in a courthouse in New York, and in front of a judge his lawyers are going to ask for this civil case to be thrown out. Now that civil lawsuit is from Virginia Giuffre. She is seeking damages for alleged sexual assault by Prince Andrew on 3 occasions when she was a teenager. Now, those are all claims that are strongly denied by the prince, and he has consistently denied any wrongdoing. But his lawyers will be relying on that settlement that was released last night between Jeffrey Epstein and Virginia Giuffre, and that settlement was made between them in 2009, and it revealed last night publicly for the first time that Ms. Giuffre settled for $500,000, and that was to end her claim that she was a victim of sex trafficking and abuse by Jeffrey Epstein from the age of 16. Now, Prince Andrew's lawyers think this could work to their advantage. They're expected to say in court today that that 2009 deal means that she can no longer have any legal action against Jeffrey Epstein, but also anyone connected to the offender. And they're going to be looking at one clause in particular. This is the wording. It says potential defendants should be released from any US legal action, including damages claims dating from the beginning of the world. So Prince Andrew's lawyers are relying on that clause of other potential defendants to include Prince Andrew, and therefore he would be protected by this settlement. Now, Giuffre's legal team will say that this settlement with Epstein is irrelevant. They will say that that was made in Florida, and these allegations that Giuffre is putting against Prince Andrew, she is alleging those incidents took place in Manhattan, in London and in the US Virgin Islands, so she will argue that that is irrelevant. But this is not the first time that the Prince and his legal team have put forward a case to have it dismissed. They have argued before that the court doesn't have jurisdiction, that Giuffre has lived in Australia for the best part of the last 20 years, and therefore the court does not have jurisdiction in this case. But it's certain, Alex, that this afternoon there is going to be a focus on the wording of that clause, other potential defendants. Does that include Prince Andrew? That is going to be at the centre of intense legal arguments in New York later on this afternoon.
Ellie, thank you so much for the update. Great having you on the programme again today. Ellie Costello there reporting from Windsor. Well, let's go back to Samantha now, because following the extremely high-profile coverage of the Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein grooming and sex trafficking scandal, you told We Need to Talk About why you think some cases get more attention than others.
I think it's a simple case of what class the victims come from. We're talking about in the UK, in Rotherham, Rochdale, and in my own hometown of Telford, young working class white girls from backgrounds not too dissimilar to my own. I was under social services from the age of 15. I flitted in and out of different children's homes, emergency accommodations, etc., etc. I worked 3 jobs just to get by. You know, I was living by all means below the poverty line, and I definitely got a sense of being ignored and being overlooked and being almost villainised for the crime of being a young woman without protection from their family or other means. Social services in towns like Telford failed young people, they suggested that it was our own promiscuity or our own background or our lack of education that caused the abuse. As recently as 2019, 17,800 cases of suspected CSE were reported by local authorities in England and Wales. This is not a problem that has gone away. Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein have been highlighted as a paedophile grooming ring, but the reason why the world seems so rapt and so eager to pay attention to it is because the perpetrators and the victims come from this jet-setting, high-stakes lifestyle that none of us have ever experienced, or at least I haven't. You know, private jets and private islands and millions of dollars being traded for sexual favours. This isn't something that many of us will be able to relate to, and it's almost been mythologized. Whereas if you go down the street on one of the estates in my hometown, you'll see it in action. This isn't something that is going away. This is something that is still a massive problem for young girls in areas like mine, but it's being ignored simply because the victims aren't newsworthy or headline grabbing.
Yeah, it's almost as if there's this sense, isn't there, that, you know, they're not worth believing or not worth stretching any sort of fibre to protect. Well, listen, also joining us is Maggie Oliver, who's a former police detective and founder of the Maggie Oliver Foundation, which provides support to adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. Maggie, great to have you on board. I mean, do you agree there with what Samantha has said, that, you know, very often that when vulnerable girls are from a working class background or from a sort of hectic background, that they're sort of passed over, they're not really taken seriously, and people aren't doing enough to protect them?
Yeah, you know what, Alex, your young speaker there, Samantha, she really, I'm not needed because she has said it all. You know, for such a young woman to have such understanding of the issues, it actually makes me feel that all the batting on about it I've done over the years has found a place to land, because Samantha clearly understands the issues behind this. You know, this case has grabbed the international headlines because of the celebrity, because of the jet set lifestyle, because it is interesting to look at the other world of these people. But in towns and cities like Telford, like Rochdale, like Rotherham, we have sexual abuse on an industrial scale still. And the victims there are being blamed. They are being judged. They're frightened to come to the authorities. And at the Maggie Oliver Foundation, we support victims who are being fobbed off. We advocate for them. They are not powerless, but the criminal justice system is a very complex system to navigate. This case, I mean, Prince Andrew has got unlimited resources to access lawyers, legal advice. They're not looking at the evidence. Young girls in, say, Rochdale, the case that I resigned over, you know, they are powerless. They don't have access to lawyers. One of the young girls in Rochdale was actually put on the indictment as a madam at the age of 15, and yet the mainstream media have never reported it because it isn't sexy. It doesn't grab the headlines in the same way. But could you imagine, for instance, the daughter of, say, Prince Andrew being accused of being a madam, not being arrested, never having legal advice, not having access to a solicitor, and having potentially a whole life destroyed for something that she had no opportunity to defend herself? It very much is a class attitude, them and us. And these victims in towns like Telford that Samantha's talking about, they are very often powerless, voiceless, fobbed off, and they are an easy target for the system to blame.
I mean, it's horrific when you think of the industrial scale of the sexual abuse against vulnerable young women going on in these towns, and yet we're still in the situation where this is being perpetuated over and over again. Do you get the impression that when it comes to the hierarchy of rights, that if you happen to be a working class woman, basically you're the bottom of the pile?
100%, Alex, 100%. That's why if you have any victims watching your programme now who feel that they are being squashed by the system, you know, approach the foundation and we will try to help. You do have a right to review. There are paths you can take to challenge decisions that are made that you don't agree with, but it is not an easy route to follow. And again, as Samantha's quite rightly said, all too often, the victims are frightened by the system. They are actually criminalised themselves as a victim of abuse. Even the young girl I was talking about, Amber, the authorities then tried to take her children away from her based on the fact that she had secretly been named as an abuser on an indictment with no opportunity to protect herself. The system is completely broken. And, I'm very grateful to GB News because you do keep the spotlight on this issue, but very little, there are very few mainstream media channels that do that. And I think that by talking about it, by bringing it all into the open, that is the way to move things forward. There is still a long, long way to go. The losers are always young victims, and they are predominantly from difficult backgrounds, from working class backgrounds.
Yeah, well, let's bring Samantha back into the conversation, because earlier on, Samantha, you said that you have yourself gone through sexual harassment, sexual assault. How comfortable were you with going to the authorities? Did you report it? Did you feel like you got the reception that you needed and the support that you needed?
Well, I was abused from age 5 to age 14, and I didn't expose my abuse until age 16. I told one of the social workers in my supported accommodation what I had experienced, and suddenly a flurry of legal action kicked in that I was not prepared for and had not asked to incite. In fact, I begged my social worker to let me take it at my own pace, and this led to when detectives knocked at my door from the CSE department, I simply didn't know how to respond. I wanted to refuse to speak to them because I feared it. I felt as though I would somehow be criminalised. As many young girls who have experienced sexual abuse, I wasn't a victim of CSE myself, but I experienced sexual abuse for nearly a decade. I feared that I would be made to feel as though it were my fault, and that me coming forward in later life meant that somehow my testimony would be denigrated. And as with, 99.6% of cases, 98.6% of cases, mine ended up having no further action taken. And this led to years and years of distrust in the system. Even now, I've had an ISVA, I've had sexual abuse therapy that I haven't been able to engage with properly because up until recently, I wasn't ready, simply because my case wasn't handled in the way that I would have hoped for it to be handled. And I have spoken to other survivors, I've spoken to other young women who have been in similar positions, and we all share the same story of feeling as though we are mistreated and swept under the rug by local authorities and social services who simply don't care and don't have the time or the resources or the energy to treat us as people rather than cases. I know just in my own experience, I've known people who have been told by social workers, if you were physically abused, why were there no bruises? These sorts of attitudes continue to perpetuate a cycle of victim blaming among young women, young working class girls who have nowhere else to turn to, and when they do seek support, they're smacked down. My own MP, Lucy Allen, who is an absolutely fantastic advocate for survivors of CSE, she's doing work on it still to this day, she spoke to me about how authorities and police services labelled young women as troublemakers or as criminals themselves, as was mentioned in the case of Amber, for daring to speak up about the abuse that they experienced. What sort of message does this send out to young girls who are currently experiencing abuse? Does it suggest that they can feel safe to come forward to social services or to the police? Or does it suggest that they will be criminalised and branded troublemakers or not worth the time and energy because somehow they caused the abuse that they experienced?
Samantha, you are, honestly, it's making me quite emotional listening to you, because
can I just come in?
You're incredible, Samantha, and thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much as well for joining us, Maggie. Keep up the fantastic work, both of you, because you're amazing advocates for young women, and we need women like you out there in the world we live in today. Oh, so I've got to catch my breath. And before we go back to the other key issue today, and I was asking, how does the Labour Party appeal to women in the future? And lots of you have been sending in your comments. Joe says, I would never, ever, ever, in capital letters, vote Labour again. If they can't defend women's rights and safe spaces, they're not worth voting for. Don't respect my sex, don't expect my ex. I think she means across in the ballot box. I like that. Adam says, as for the parties not standing up for women, I think that major parties are not standing up for the average person across the board. It's not only women being left out to dry. The average Brit is. John says, let people be what they want to be. But why do we need to interfere with those of us who are biological men and women? And Kev says, I was a lifelong Labour voter, but as a Brexiteer, I couldn't bring myself to vote for them anymore. After contacting my local Labour Party, giving my views on Brexit, I was labelled as far right. Well, thank you, as ever, for sending in your comments. Now, we're going to move on, try and sort of change the tone a bit. I think we all might have got a bit weepy there. So let's bring it back to something a little bit more fun. Have you ever wondered what women want? It's an enigma that has clearly befuddled men since the Garden of Eden. So here on We Need to Talk About, we're going to try and find out, are wolf whistles offensive? Is holding the door open cringe? Do we really want to split the bill? It's time for the daily trigger warning. So, Samantha, you brave little thing, you. Honestly, you've blown me away. Whatever you say, I'm going to agree with you at this point. But come on, what is it that you want to confine to the dustbin of history?
I spoke about it a little earlier in the show, but I'd like to confine to the dustbin of history, telling women to take it as a compliment. Harassment is never flattering, no matter what. End of story. You shouldn't have to take abuse or harassment or vitriolic comments as though it was somehow a testimony to your good looks or charm. Women don't need the validation of men to feel good about themselves, and we don't have to take anything as a compliment if we don't want to.
Samantha, honestly, you were one of the most powerful young speakers I've ever met. It's been so delightful having you on the show today. How's it been for you, by the way?
It's been amazing. I've loved it. I'm definitely going to be tuning in every day.
Good. We're definitely going to have you back as well. And you also, let's do just very quickly one last thing. We haven't got long left on the programme, but the last time we spoke together, it was about your university, Marge University, Durham, showing girls how to actually do things like escorting to fund their studies.
I think, obviously, this is a story that blew up in the media over the past few months, but from my perspective, having obviously experienced abuse, having been in those vulnerable situations, we shouldn't be teaching young girls and young women how to get into potentially dangerous situations. We should be showing them the way out. We should not be glamorising sex work as a legitimate form of income.
Couldn't agree more. Samantha, it's been wonderful having you on the programme. You are an inspiration. That's it for me. Lots more to talk about. Join me again at the same time tomorrow. Darren McCaffrey is next with the briefing, but first, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves, there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. If you've been out today, you'll know it's turned colder. Certainly feeling cold out there this evening, exacerbated by a brisk and pretty bitter wind across the northeast. And there's some wintry showers around as well. Could turn things pretty icy through the night and first thing in the morning, particularly across northern Scotland, close to this area of low pressure. Look at those isobars really squeezing together. It's been very, very windy across the northeast with snow showers here, blizzards in places. Now, those winds slowly easing overnight. We do have a yellow warning in place for both the winds and the snow showers coming in, potentially turning things icy across northeast Scotland. Also, the risk of some icy conditions for Wales and Northern Ireland as the showers keep going here through the night. Elsewhere, largely clear. Temperatures getting close to freezing in towns and cities, a little below in rural areas. A chilly start then to Wednesday for sure, but generally a fine sunny day. Still some showers for Wales and Northern Ireland. They should fizzle out here, and wintry showers will keep going all day across the far northeast, where the winds will continue to ease down. In fact, for all of us, the winds will be lighter tomorrow, and with more sunshine. Actually, although temperatures are below average for the time of year, it shouldn't feel too bad out there. A pleasant, bright winter's day. Quite quickly, though, through tomorrow evening, we are going to see a frost forming fairly sharply. As the winds ease down, temperatures are going to tumble quickly. There'll still be some wintry showers in the far northeast, but for most it's going to be dry and clear, and the temperatures will drop, even in urban areas, below freezing, -1, -2 in the countryside, -5, -6, maybe -10, where there's snow lying across Scotland. And then we see a band of wet weather coming in during Thursday, so that'll pick the temperatures up, but also it will bring some hill snow to Northern Ireland, but perhaps more widely over the hills and mountains of North Wales, Northern England and Scotland, some snow for a time on the hills before it turns back to rain, and eventually things turn a little milder once more from the southwest.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.